Hi everyone, this is Jatin. I work as a software engineer here at GeekyAnts. So today I'll be presenting a tech talk which is based upon optimizing Angular with lazy loading. So as I've been working with Angular from past couple of months, so we'll be using this technique to explain you for the optimization of performance which we develop for the apps with Angular, which is lazy loading. So I'll be explaining you step by step for the implementation as well as the benefits and why do we use this. So let's continue with the slides and I'll be explaining the things as we go forward in this presentation. So this is a brief introduction to Angular. I've just added this slide to explain about Angular, just a basic thing. So Angular is, as we know, it is a platform and framework for building single page applications. It is written in TypeScript and maintained by Google. So core features of Angular would be component-based architecture, dependency injection, routing, and two-way data binding, which I have just added basic phrases or simple explanation for all of these things. So these are just core features of Angular, which we use in common every application we build with Angular. So this was just introduction to let you know guys about Angular, and we'll be explaining the furthermore, which is the topic of the discussion, which is lazy loading. So why do we need optimization and which technique are we using? So optimizing Angular applications. So performance matters for large size applications and user experience. So for large scale applications, we need things to optimize the performance, which would be required, as if we can take example of even healthcare or even fintech applications, which will be tending to grow with time based upon number of components, number of change requests, number of addition of things which will be coming to handle a lot of data for each user, for each patient or something. So to affect the load times, and which will be increasing the user experience to a good manner, we'll be using this optimization technologies, which user provides us with three, which is AOT, ahead of time compilation, pre-shaking, and lazy loading. The commonly used one would be lazy loading, which loads only the necessary part of the app and not all of those components we have developed. So lazy loading is such technique which will be using to load only the component which is required upon navigation. User can navigate to a particular component, it will be only loaded upon that. So just with a simple example, if I have to say, we have two pages, home, products, and cart. User wants to go to a products page, so he'll be navigating to the products page from side nav or any button which will be leading him to the route for products. So it will be only loaded when user hits that route and lands upon that page, not upon the initial load of the page, which will lead to improvement in the time for the loading and browser application. This is why performance matters in Angular applications or even any application we use. So a basic introduction to lazy loading would be, it is just a performance optimization technique. It delays the loading of all the modules until and unless they're required, just as I was explaining with the previous example I gave. So it is important because for the large scale applications where bundle size and components and load times will be an issue, it is basic that it will create an issue when the number of components will increase and the loading time has to increase with that. So the goal of today's talk would be understanding lazy loading in Angular, why it is implemented, how to implement that, and seeing the performance getting improved with the things we'll be implementing. So this is a bit of introduction to the lazy loading, which we'll be implementing in the next slides or something. So why do we need that? So large bundle size will take long times to load, frustrating UX, especially on the mobile networks in region or depends upon the network we use. So the solution is that lazy loading loads only modules when they're required. It reduces the bundle size of all the components, faster initial load, and improved user experience, which is the important thing which you have to take care of while developing an application to improve the UX. So for the previous versions of Angular, we had these common components which are not standalone components. So for that, we used to have a common component will be generating, as we know. So ng generate component, and it can be products, home, or anything. We have to just create a module for the same component as well as a routing module. So for that, we'll be just creating one component. We have to create a module and a routing module for that. And for each of these routes, we'll be going to each page from the application. We used to define all the routes in the app.routing page, which will be for the routes of each of the pages. It can be products, home, or any page. So even if you see the example I've given here, so path is products. We are using this load children for routing to the products module. It will be only loaded as a children component when a user will route to the products module. So going further into this, how to set up the lazy loading. So we have to just generate a component and a module for that, setting up the routes in app routing module, which will be automatically generated when we develop any Angular application. So we have to define the path, and even with that we have to just import the part of the path of that module, and we have to just define the module we'll be developing here for products cart, or each page we have to just generate a product or cart module dynamically according to the component structure we'll be following. So setting up lazy loading, why we have to set up this lazy loading is as I've explaining for the optimization, and how to set up is generating components and modules for that. And to verify we have to use this dev tools for the inspect tab. In the JS we'll be using things to see how many files or how the files are being loaded according to the things we are routing to. It can be products page or the initial load of the page, we have to check there. So polyfills main TS files will be loaded upon the initial load, but when we go to a particular page, so it will be just loading a chunk of that file, not all the files, which will be increasing the performance and hence reducing the time for the loading. So in the case of Angular standalone components for the newer version 17 and more, so you can directly use lazy load components for this. We don't need to create any modules for that. So while defining the paths, you have to define the path like path is products. Load children would be importing that component itself and importing that and routing it to the products component itself upon the click of that navigation tab. So I'll be explaining to you this, and why lazy loading makes a big difference you will be able to see once I explain you with the code over there. So I'll explain you with the demo code I have just created for that. So there we go. With the products component I've created two components, which is products and home. And for the app routes, I've defined home as the initial page and products as the secondary page, which will be loaded upon click of that tab. I've used load component, which is used for the newer version of Angular. I'm using this latest version of Angular over here. So to be loading this product component upon navigating to this. So in the app HTML, I have created two router links for the home and for the products. So upon routing to each of these, you will be seeing the files and chunks which will be loaded over there. And app component has this router outlet and outer link, which I have defined for this routing app routing file to export it to there. And I'll be explaining you this with one thing. Let me just copy this thing and we'll be routing it to there. Okay. So now I'm loading this initial page over here. So upon the load, you will be seeing all these files which will be loaded upon initial load, which is mains, polyfills and client. So now I'm just clearing this inspect. Now we have to go to this products page. You see those files won't be downloaded or like loaded again. So if you go to products page, just a chunk of this file which will be from the routes page, it will be just loaded. Even if you click on this home page, it will be taking you to the home page, but nothing of the JS files was loaded again, because we have already initially loaded all of these files and it won't be loaded again, resulting in a better performance. Even if I load this page again for the products component, as it was already loaded, it will be loaded once again. I'll be going to the home component. See, the files are not loaded. Second thing is, I'll be going to the products page again. Nothing is being loaded because it was stored as a chunk for that and it is not yet loaded again. So user can route to all of these pages independently and reducing the number of time it will take for loading of the JS files, hence leading to a better user experience. So this is just a basic demo for the purpose for the initial or like initial demo for this two components and for a basic Angular application. When the applications will scale, when we have a locally built application, we have just integrated the APIs and all, it will take further more time to load all of these things as well. So once the application is built, from the routing you will be doing this same thing for all of the other components apart from the initial component. just to make sure that these components like product, it can be cart or it can be wish list page, so it can be increasing as it is. So just to make sure these pages are only loaded upon the initial load, this page is loaded, and upon click of each of these components, that pages are being loaded, so that the user will be having a better experience and pages can get loaded easily, not making the user wait for each of these pages to get loaded and to go there. And while lazy loading makes a big difference, you might have seen as well. So large initial bundle equal to longer load time, which is very obvious. So with lazy loading, only the necessary modules are loaded initially. Modules are loaded only when accessed. End result is better performance and initial load time is reduced to more than half, maybe we can say. So best practices for lazy loading would be modularizing the app, breaking the apps into smaller feature-based modules. For the better folder structure, we'll be creating the apps in a defined manner with the modules and components as well. For the standalone components, you don't need to create modules, so to just create components. For example, ng generate component, products, cards, define them in a structure and just make this component app.routing module do the work as it is. As for the product, it can be used the same way for other modules also. So don't overuse lazy loading. As I was just explaining, we just have two pages which I just showed you, so we won't need lazy loading for two or more modules. When the loading will take time or modules will get increased based upon the timing or requirements of the user, we'll be using loading time will be increasing, so we'll be using this lazy loading for all of those modules accordingly. And preload strategy is another thing which we can use for lazy loading. We can just define this in the route. For route, we'll be requiring preload odd module so that loading reduces even more. For we'll be preloading some of the modules so that when user will be accessing that, they'll be just increasing or like increasing the user experience and reducing the time which user will take to go there. We are just preloading all of these modules so that when user will be accessing say products page, it will be loaded within instant of a second or something. Optimizing production build using the Angular CLI. So for the production build for the end result, we'll be using this all techniques so that user will have a better experience, and hence this practices will make the application far more better. Ending this with a conclusion and key takeaways would be summary to summarize the discussion we just had. So lazy loading helps break large application into smaller bundles, improving initial load times and the performance overall, improving the user experience. So lazy loading can significantly reduce the load time. It can make the app more effective, defining in a better folder structure. So using preload strategies when needed to balance the performance, when we need to balance such modules which are very important or we know that user will obviously get there. For example, the products page, so we can just preload that module beforehand. It is just an optional thing. Lazy loading will do the thing as it is. Try implementing this lazy loading in the applications you develop when there are more than or components more than two, or we have n number of components, so just for the better performance. And hence we are using this in our application as well, and whichever application I develop for the projects, so I usually tend to use this lazy loading so that for the better user experience. And once the APIs or backend will be integrated, it usually takes way more time to load all of these components. So just to compensate or like reduce the time or make the application better, we tend to use lazy loading, or even we had two more strategies, maybe go for them also, but this is kind of easy to go approach and not very complicated. So just we're using lazy loading, and try implementing this with your applications and for the better performance. So this was all about lazy loading and Angular applications. So I'm humbled to be a part of like explaining you guys about this, and thank you for the valuable time. Thank you. Bye.